WildRift has a problem, and those problems are broken champions, and you'll see them every single game, and it's just quite overbearing to face them in literally every game. And if you want to get rid of that, you should probably stay here and listen to what I'm about to tell you as to what you should be banning. Anyway, before we hop into that, let's talk about our question of the day. What is your go-to ban for this patch? Let me know in the comments below. First on this list is going to be Zoe. Yes, Zoe has been the target of a few nerfs recently and upcoming, and probably again in the near future. However, the changes to this champion are not enough, and they will not be enough, trust me. This champion is fundamentally broken in how it functions, and is just brutal in solo queue. She's even a solid staple in competitive, especially in the Chinese region in the current tournament there. This champion's damage is absurd, and even though the damage is going to be removed or lowered a little bit, it's still not going to change anything about this champion and as to why she's broken. Something that many people underestimate is the power of her second ability and Nimbus Cloak. Catching this champion, even though this ability has been nerfed in terms of movement speed, is quite the impossible feat if the champion gets to pick up more stamina spells on the floor. Not to mention, this champion's laning phase is also quite overbearing. Being a ranged champion with AoE abilities that have a lot of bonus damage and being able to have a budget Sheen mechanic on your passive, plus CC in your kit, makes it kinda difficult for the enemies to capitalize on. So even the assassins during the laning phase will get brutally beaten up by you. But as the game goes on, and if you were to side lane, which obviously you don't want on this champion, these champions would then have counterplay to you. Other than this, now we come to the real problem. In solo queue, a lot of fights are just happening around objectives and people just walk in the most weird ways possible. Zoe loves catching people off guard. Using her third ability through walls and catching them and putting them to sleep to then one-shot them is one of her go-to things. Not only that, her teammates can also capitalize on that bonus damage from that bubble and on the CC effect as well. And since there's not too high of a cooldown on that ability, she can do so frequently without any risk involved. She can just connect through a wall and that's it. And if there's one thing that's probably the most tilting thing about fighting a Zoe is you just can't flash away from her. Cause if you do, she'll pick up your summoner spell, flash after you and be faster than you because of Nimbus Cloak and the bonus movement speed on her second ability. This champion needs other changes, or maybe some changes to magic resist, because this champion's damage is absurd and I really hope there'll be more changes in the future. The next champion that is a solo queue demon is Akali. We all remember the distant past where Akali was a brutal lane bully, but nowadays she isn't that strong anymore during the laning phase. In the distant past, it was your first ability that drove enemies into their deaths, because you had 3 of them available if you played it properly, on level 1 that is, which means you would kill everyone, or literally anyone, that would face you. However, nowadays that's not the case anymore. You can try and be a little bit more passive during the early stages of the game and just safely get towards your level 5 spike. Similar to other champions like Zed, that point then will be the turning point. You'll get to kill people super easily. Nonetheless, there are a few ways how you can abuse Akali's early game to your advantage, and it's your third ability. If you believe that the enemy is going to try and actively zone you, you can use your third ability to dish out a significant amount of damage to them. Using the first charge of it to proc the bone plating if you get the hit, and then charging in to proc the passive and just dealing more damage on top of it, makes life brutal for the enemy, especially if you have electrocute. Don't forget though, that's not very consistent and it's just a niche kind of thing which you can do in the heat of the moment if you think it's the right thing to do, but for that you need to not allocate any skill points unless the time is right. When you hit the later stages of the game though, so level 5 for example, the counterplay for the enemy champion becomes kinda problematic, cause then your ultimate ability will grant you all the gap closes you need to make sure that all of your other spells will hit. And if we're truly honest about this, nobody really likes facing an Akali, cause this champion, for example if you're an AD carry in solo queue, just minding your own business and chilling in the backline, will just look at you in the wrong way, cast a second charge of her ultimate ability, and then an auto attack afterwards, and then you just instantly die. There's not much you can do about this unless you're fast enough with your fingers to respond properly with a flash or a stasis enchant, but other than this, you probably just die in an instant, and nobody, literally nobody likes having that happen to them. The next champion we need to talk about is Lulu. There are 2 support champions in this game that are still an absolute demonic existence for all the people that play this game. Number 1 is Lulu. Lulu allows even the worst AD carries on this planet to become actually faker and run you down. They deal so much more damage with the Lulu, are so much tankier, and can get away with anything they do with zero skill involved. The only positive takeaway is that Lulu can still die, but the other champion I'm going to talk about next is a little bit more troublesome. So when you face Lulus or generally just play solo queue, the default bans is often just a Lulu. Because this champion, and it's one of the few champions that is actually this crazy, allows AD carries to be picked without a Vori in solo queue. If you have played against, for example, a Tristana or a Vayne, these champions will always win the game, or most likely win the game, even though they are going 0 and 5 in the early game. Because as the game goes then on, the Lulu will provide them with everything they need, and, well, I'm sorry guys, I hate Lulu, and, well, Lulu players, no, you're bad people. Jokes aside, Lulu is an absolute demonic existence, and I can only suggest to you that you ban this champion if you value your LP in solo queue, especially in the upper elos, because those champions take over the game super easily. The next champion that is similar in that regard is Yuumi, but Yuumi has significantly less counterplay than the Lulu. Lulu would only make you tankier and provide you with bonus on-hit damage and just attack speed, which is really cool for maybe bruises or generally AD carries, like thematically speaking. Yuumi, on the other hand, also empowers mages with absurd numbers of ability power, and here is the kind of problem with this. Fundamentally speaking, AP damage in this game is broken. You have way too little magic resistance, and the earliest way you can buy magic resistance usually is your third item, onwards obviously. With this in mind, Yuumi comes into a place where you have already racked up quite the amount of AP, and because Yuumi is also an AP champion that gets quite a good number of AP with Ludens into Rapidon Staff Gap and probably a Spell Thieves, or maybe if she's smarter for laning it's a Relic Shield, but well, that's just preference. You have insane numbers, and with those insane numbers and then having Void Staff at your disposal on other champions, the AP champion will one-hit you. Quite literally. So for example, if Yuumi jumps into an AP champion with 3 items, that is basically emulating like 4.5 to 5 items for the AP champion then, just because of Yuumi's existence. And as you rack up more AP, the more powerful it becomes. Like, let's just imagine you have a Ziggs on your team, and the Ziggs is in the super late game. You have all items you need, and the Liandry's Torment. Then the bonus AP from the Yuumi will make sure that if you hit any kind of spell on an enemy champion, the Liandry's alone will tear you apart. And think about other champions, Diana, sending you into Narnia, Zoe for example, absolutely destroying you. And the problem with this is that Yuumi is also versatile in the way she can jump on people. It doesn't really matter if she jumps on an AD or an AP champion, they'll both equally be absolutely powerful in the sense that they can't die and they'll hunt you down, because Yuumi adds a lot of bonus damage. And don't get me started about laning, because Yuumi laning is one of the most toxic things you can think about. If the Yuumi is detached during your laning phase and actively trades with you using a third ability, you will have big problems. Don't forget, Loyalty as a rune is kind of useless, so she can even run Bone Plating and a Relic Shield, which I mentioned earlier. So there's not much you can do to get a Yuumi out of the laning phase, because she's just so grossly overstat as a champion. Last but surely not the least comes my favorite ban for this patch though, it is Wukong. This champion literally doesn't die, and it's quite the annoying thing. Like, you cannot really kill him in laning unless he wants to die, similar to Garen, but he's also super high impact in team first situations. The self-sustain this champion has, and also the chronic illness in solo queue that people don't buy anti-healing, makes it so difficult for this champion to be removed. And for some weird reason, this champion always snowballs, and it's not even a rare sight to see this champion picked. It's frequently picked, frequently snowballs, and just takes over games because it's unkillable. And even though that maybe in the later stages of the game he doesn't deal as much damage and is just a CC bot, you never reach those stages, because this champion takes over the game too fast and never has to do anything in order to sustain, because, well, he just hits you, like literally bonks you onto the head with his staff and heals for half his HP per bonk. How stupid is this? And with the new items in the game, and the ability to go into Spirit Visage, Twin Guard, and all of those kind of things, how do you kill this champion? You literally can't unless you're equally as fat on a champion that, for example, has true damage in his kit. And that basically concludes today's video. Ban Zoe, ban Akali, ban Lulu, ban Yuumi, ban Wukong. Thank me later and come back for more WildRift content. See you soon.